One of my favorite things about February is chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. That's why I'm so excited to be at Robin's Chocolates. She was named one of the top 10 chocolatiers, not in Longmont, not in Colorado, but in the entire North America in 2013. How do you win an honor like that, Robin?
I don't really know their whole selection process. They just called me in October of 2013 and said, we are thinking of putting you on the list. Are you okay with that?
Am I okay with that? Yes.
So I said yes. And they called me early November and said, you were on the list. We'll let you know when we narrow it down. If somebody ordered my chocolates for them, they they don't tell you.
Oh my.
And then in December, he called and said, you are in the top 10. And they don't rank you, it's just 10 people.
And this was Dessert Magazine or something?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then they said I couldn't say anything until the magazine came out.
Oh gosh, and that was hard, I'm sure.
That was 2.5 months for it to come out. They had some publication stuff going on.
Well, I know that you're one of Oprah's favorites also, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. When you joined the Army, it was because you wanted adventure.
Navy.
Navy. See, that's even better. You joined the Navy to see the world, right?
That, and I wanted to go back to school, but we have a thing in my family of too much pride, so I wouldn't ask my mom to send me back to college with the money. And I figured the Navy was a good way to do it.
And was it?
Yes and no. It was more so what I learned in the Navy, besides attention to detail, very good work ethic, and to always do the best you can, otherwise you have to do it over.
That's smart. Now, 2 years into being in the Navy, you had your son.
Correct.
What did that do? I can't imagine being in the service and having a child.
Well, it changed a lot of things. My original goal was to go for the officer program, but when I got divorced and became a single mom, that made it a little rougher.
Sure.
So I stayed as enlisted, and I was in the electronics field. It was very good schooling, lots of different work that we did, and he just went with me everywhere.
Wow.
So he got to see the world also from a young age on.
That's so exciting. And then you decided that you would do other things. And again, we're going to talk about that. But right now, I love the idea that you're going to show us how to airbrush chocolates. So let's go airbrush a little chocolate right now.
So airbrushing, we start with colored cocoa butter. We melt it, and it has to be at a specific temperature in order to adhere properly and have a nice shine. And we start with, this is our lavender that I'm airbrushing. And this one's a fade. This idea actually came from my son. Oops. And then, because we try not to waste this stuff, because all ingredients are expensive in the chocolate world, and then we just clean it off. So this will dry, and in about 15 minutes we can cast it, but I have some already to go to show you how we cast chocolate. Okay, I'm going to show you how we cast a mold. We have our airbrush mold. This one is for strawberries and cream. And these molds are polycarbonate. They last a lifetime if we take good care of them, which means no dishwashers, no water. We hand polish them. So we fill it with tempered chocolate. And we used to temper all our chocolate by hand, but as we grew, I couldn't keep up. So we have our wonderful little tempering machine. He's not little, but we call him Fred. He's named after the master chocolatier at Valrhona in France. Although He goes by Frederic. Then we vibrate it a little. And this just gets the air bubbles out. And then take out the excess chocolate. Once it's dripped for a little bit, I scrape off the bottom, and I'm keeping it upside down so the chocolate continues to flow out any excess. And when it's finished, it's a chocolate-lined shell. And we let it dry upside down so it forms a bit of a ridge. And this one has dried, and in about half an hour, this will be ready to fill. Depending on how warm it is in here, we keep our kitchen pretty cool.
And you're making this?
We are making these. We're working on our Valentine's collection. These are all molded chocolates. We have our Ricciardo's Coffee Caramel, which is a local decaf coffee liqueur, port wine reduction, rosemary caramel, mint chocolate chip, the chocolate caramel fleur de sel, dulce blonde, passion fruit honey, white ginger rum, which is another local liqueur, lavender, and raspberry. And we have a few more to go. We aren't quite ready for Valentine's. The next thing I'm going to show you is a different type of chocolate. They're called enrobed chocolates. So these are all molded, and they're kind of the top of the food chain. They're the most work, most labor intensive. And then next we have enrobed chocolates. And these are made in a slab that we then cut on a confectionery guitar, which looks like a big egg slicer. And then when it's ready to be enrobed in chocolate, we send it through on a conveyor belt, and it gets a stencil on top.
Robin, one of the things that you decided to do once you came back and came to Colorado is to go to a French cooking school. Now, why French, for one thing?
It's just so elegant, and their tastes very refined, and they have one of the oldest histories of high-end cooking.
And that was Avignon.
Correct.
And I even said it right. Right. You know, I've seen the movie Julia, and I wondered, did they treat you nicely because you're American and a woman, or was it a fight?
Incredibly, no.
Really?
The patisserie that I worked in, they take interns. They call them stagiaires, and I was the oldest one they ever had. And people in France don't normally change careers later in life. They stick with what they learn. But the French chef and he didn't speak much English, and my French was pretty rusty. So we sat there with our little dictionaries, and by the end of my time there, it was just such an incredible experience. It made me go from savory cooking to sweet.
One of the things that we really need to mention is all of your life you were allergic to chocolate. Now, here you are in a chocolate store.
My mom thought it was pretty ironic. I could eat a chocolate chip cookie and have hives everywhere.
Wow.
And yeah, it wasn't real attractive.
No.
So I never developed a taste for it. I stayed away from it. And then at the patisserie, you don't tell a French chef, no, I'm not going to taste. That would be an insult.
Right.
So I tasted it, and after a few days, I realized I had no hives, I wasn't itching, and I just figured, okay, I'm not allergic to chocolate. And when I came back to the U.S., my husband went out and bought me a chocolate bar from the grocery store, and half an hour later I had hives.
Oh. So it's something that's in the chocolate, or the difference in fine chocolate and mass market or something?
If you read the ingredients on our chocolate, much smaller list.
Ooh, sounds lovely. In France, you studied to be a pastry chef. And now, in addition to your wonderful chocolates, you also have pastries and wedding cakes.
So this is where our pastry work is done. We started out just with brownies, but after Jen took over our pastry 5.5 years ago, she's been slowly building it and getting better and better every year. She's working on some cakes for wedding flowers, or working on some flowers for wedding cakes right now. And these are all made with sugar paste. And Jen has a lot of patience because these are very tedious and time consuming. Her assistant is Cassidy, And she's working on our sugar cookies that are all hand decorated, and this is for Valentine's. So they're fashioned after those little conversation hearts, only a lot bigger and more filling.
So Robin, when you got out of the Navy, you went into IT, is that right?
Correct.
That's a completely different field than this.
Yeah.
What happened between IT and this wonderful chocolate store?
In 2005, Sun Microsystems had an opening for out here, and my husband and I just wanted a change of scenery. We came out here. We took an amateur cooking class together, and it sparked my interest. And the Culinary School of the Rockies had a professional program for French cooking. And I took that, and about 8 months later, I put in my resignation and said I was going to go to full-time cooking school and become a chef.
That is very brave.
Yeah.
So did you work in Denver some and Boulder some before you came here?
Yes. I worked at a few restaurants. I worked at Flagstaff. That was my first job, the Flagstaff House up in the mountains in Boulder.
Oh.
And then the Brown Palace in Denver. And then some little places that are no longer around.
Well, I want to find out how you made this jump to becoming your own boss, but let's go see how you can pour a slab of chocolate, which sounds as good as anything I've ever heard.
So to make the enrobed chocolates, we start with our frame, and these are just hard plastic frames, and we put a foot on it. So we spread chocolate and make a very thin base. Now Brianna's going to pour the espresso that you just tried. She pours it all down in the front. And we try not to waste any. We get every little bit. That was something I learned at the Flagstaff House. You never waste anything. And then she just pulls back the slide. Let me get that. And then sometimes we have to adjust. This is a recipe that we're working on for a little bit of adjustment as far as the quantity. Go ahead and just turn it around and slide toward. There you go. Brianna just had her first anniversary with us. She hasn't gotten sick of me yet, or chocolate. And that's it. This will now sit for about 2 days before we put it on the conveyor belt and enrobe it with chocolate. A lot of chocolate work takes time, patience, a lot of patience on our part, and you can't rush the process. It's all very, it's detail, and you have to pay attention to every little detail all along the way.
So Robin, you started out in chocolates, just maybe doing it as a hobby, giving it to friends.
It started out when my son was 4 years old. We had about 30 single parent sailors coming to our house in Spain for Christmas dinner. And being a child, he wanted to help mommy.
Yeah.
So I gave him some pretzels, melted chocolate chips, and told him to dip the pretzels, and that would be a Christmas present to everybody that came in.
Oh, that's neat.
So the kitchen was a mess, but we had a great time. And the following year, we added some more chocolate treats and caramels, and it just stayed as a hobby until culinary school. And while I was in France, my interest blossomed in pastries and chocolate, and I just kind of kept going at it from there and read a lot of books.
Well, that's good. Well, I suspect that Oprah, if I may use her name, is as big a chocolate fan as I am. How did she know about you?
It was actually a journalist that got in touch with me and asked if I would be willing to do an article for O Magazine on her feature was called "It's Never Too Late," and it was about women that change careers later in life.
Oh, that's neat.
It was interesting, the other
Yeah.
5 women.
But it wasn't about the chocolates.
Right, it was
See,
about me.
Oh, that's interesting. I assumed it was about the chocolate place. Now, how did you get the name Robin Chocolates? It's no apostrophe S.
It started out as a little something, a line from Winnie the Pooh. And one day my mom said, nobody has any idea of what that is. And I said, yeah, I don't know what to call it. And she said, well, you really like your name. Why not Robin Chocolates?
Oh, that's neat.
So
now people think of you as Robin
Yes.
Chocolates. Oh, that's great.
a lot of kids think that's my last name.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
What is? We're gonna go right now. We're gonna learn how you cap chocolate, and we'll be right back.
So the final step in the molded chocolates is putting a base on it. Earlier yesterday, Brianna filled each cavity with ganache, and this is our Mexican mole with habanero. First thing we do is we warm it up just a little bit, and this is so that when you bite into the chocolate, the bottom doesn't fall off. We use our very expensive hair dryer here. We don't want to heat it too much because it could take the chocolate too far out of temper and then it would not look good. Put a thin strip of chocolate on and push it so that it covers each cavity. Once every cavity is covered, I kind of pull it away from the edges just to keep things neat and then slide it off. Now this will sit for another hour and then we pop them out. And to take them out of the mold, it's a pretty simple process. We just give it a little tap or a big tap and they come out like that. And if you like spicy chocolate, this one isn't heavily spicy because I can't handle too much spice, but it's got the habanero in it, which hits the back of your throat. So after you eat it and swallow it, then the heat starts to build.
Robin, you have a saying, and that is that it's ingredients, technique, and passion. Can we talk a little about each one of those things? What's important about the ingredients in your chocolate?
Well, if you're not using good quality or great quality ingredients, you're not going to have a great product. I try to use local whenever I can. We use local spirits. We use a French chocolate. Valrhona is considered one of the best in the world, and its taste is just incredibly unique.
Ooh, how nice. Well, what about technique?
Technique, that's where it's just a lot of practice. When I started out, it was pretty messy. I've gotten
Like your
much
son
better.
making pretzels, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just practice, 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 and not giving up.
Yeah. And how do you train the people who work for you?
It's kind of hard because sometimes I can micromanage.
Yeah.
So I have to back away and let them kind of get their feet wet. My assistant right now went to a very good culinary school.
That's good.
And she kind of hit the ground running, but she had to learn how to do it my way. Because the
Sure.
production world is very different than a school world.
Right. Well, what about passion?
If you don't have it, you're not going to go anywhere.
So unless you have a passion for the chocolate, don't do it, right?
I grew up believing that if you don't have a passion for whatever you're doing, then you're doing the wrong thing.
Oh, I like that. Do people seem surprised that you have a world-class chocolate place right here in Longmont?
We get a few people saying, "Why are you in Longmont?" But then we get a lot of people in Longmont saying, "We're really glad you're here."
Oh, that's neat.
And I love Longmont, so it's a great place.
Before we go, tell us some of what do people most often come to you for?
Chocolate.
Well, no, besides that, let's get specific.
Our best seller is the chocolate caramel fleur de sel, and most of them are pretty equal after that. if it doesn't sell well, we no longer make it. And it goes through a pretty rigorous taste test. First, I have to approve it,
Yeah.
and then I let everybody in my staff try it. And then we have a few select customers that happen to wander in, and I'll say, here, we just made this new thing, taste it. Summertime is our experimentation time.
Oh, that's neat. And do you get rid of things all the time and add new, or?
We try. It seems like every time we get rid of one thing, people will all of a sudden start asking for it, and it's really hard to keep. And that's how I started out with 4 chocolates. Now we have over 30.
Oh my.
It's very hard to get rid of old things.
Well, I know that fleur de sel, I think, means flower of salt.
Right.
So is that a trend? I mean, I'm seeing more things with salt in it. Are you trendy in chocolates as well?
Yes and no. I do some new things, but I've always loved tradition. And traditional tastes like raspberry and caramel they're comfort almost. And then we have something like our Mexican mole, which is a spicy chocolate. And one of our probably most out there chocolates is our lemon basil. It's a lemon pâte de fouille, which is like a thin layer of jelly, and a basil white chocolate ganache.
Oh my.
And our other one is blackberry sage.
They sound wonderful, and they sound very bolder. You know, the sage and the basil, and
They weren't created with the intention of being boulderish. It was more of what tastes good with what. Like with the blackberry sage, we started out with just sage, and it was too savory. And we added some blackberry to it, and it became really good.
oh, that's nice. Thank you so much, Robin. I love it, and I love Robin chocolates.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on Love You Longmont.